The school hallway was buzzing with the usual morning sounds. Children laughing, lockers closing, teachers greeting students, but something felt different that day. A strange tension hung in the air, the kind that makes people pause without knowing why. That was when little Alina, a quiet 5-year-old girl with big brown eyes and 2 messy braids, walked into her classroom and refused, absolutely refused, to sit in her chair. At first, it seemed like a simple moment of childhood stubbornness. Kids have their moods, and teachers learn to handle them with patience. But this time, something was off. Miss Hartley, the young kindergarten teacher known for her gentle voice and warm smile, knelt beside Alina and tried to coax her with kindness. She offered her crayons, her favorite picture book, even a seat near the window where sunlight always made the room feel softer. But Alina stood there silently, clutching the edges of her little backpack as if it were the only safe place left in the world. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was afraid, deeply afraid, and she wouldn't say why. Miss Hartley felt her heart tighten. She'd taught many children, but this reaction was unlike anything she had seen before. She noticed the way Alina kept glancing over her shoulder, the way her small hands trembled, and the way she wouldn't let anyone get close. Something was wrong, and Miss Hartley could feel it. Trying once more, she gently reached out to guide Alina toward her seat. But the moment she touched the fabric of the little girl's skirt, Alina flinched so hard that Miss Hartley froze. The reaction was so sudden, so full of fear, that the entire classroom fell silent. Nearby children stopped coloring. A few looked up from their puzzles, sensing the shift even if they didn't understand it. Miss Hartley tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. As she carefully lifted the hem of Alina's skirt, only enough to understand why the child was so frightened, her breath caught in her throat. What she saw made her step back, her hand covering her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. She just stood there, shaking, trying to understand how something like this could happen to someone so young, so innocent. A chill went through her body. Whatever had happened, whatever had brought Alina to this moment, it wasn't something that could wait. Miss Hartley reached for her phone with trembling fingers, her voice barely steady as she dialed the emergency number. The other children watched quietly, not knowing what was happening but feeling the weight of the moment. As the call connected and Miss Hartley tried to explain through tears, Alina slowly backed away from her desk, her eyes fixed on the door as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. And just as the wailing sound of distant sirens began to echo through the school grounds, a shadow passed across the classroom window, leaving Miss Hartley with a feeling that whatever was wrong had only just begun. Miss Hartley tried to steady her breathing as she ended the call, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The other teachers in the hallway had begun to notice the unusual stillness in her classroom, yet no one dared walk in. Something about the look on Miss Hartley's face when she stepped toward the doorway kept them frozen in place. She wasn't just pale, she looked shaken to her core, like she'd seen something she couldn't make sense of. Outside, the faint sound of sirens grew clearer, cutting through the morning air. But inside the room, everything felt slow and heavy. Alina stood near the corner, hugging her small backpack against her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't ask questions. She just stared at the door with wide, fearful eyes, as if she expected someone she didn't want to see to walk in at any moment. Miss Hartley swallowed hard and knelt down a few steps away, careful not to frighten her further. "Alina," she whispered softly, "you're safe here." She hoped her voice sounded more confident than she felt. The truth was, she didn't understand anything yet. She didn't know what had happened before the little girl arrived at school, or what had caused that deep fear inside her. But she knew enough to trust her instincts, and every instinct told her something serious was going on. As Miss Hartley tried to gather her thoughts, her mind drifted back to the first day she met Alina. She remembered the shy smile, the way she always kept close to her older brother during drop-off, and the way she never spoke much but always listened carefully. There had never been any signs that something was wrong. No unusual behavior, no complaints, nothing that would make a teacher worry. Alina had simply been a quiet child, soft-spoken, sweet, and often lost in her drawings. Then she remembered something else. For the past week, Alina had arrived later than usual. Not late enough to raise alarm, but late enough to notice. Her hair would be slightly messy, her eyes a bit too tired. When Miss Hartley once asked if everything was all right at home, the little girl had simply nodded without meeting her eyes. It didn't seem like a big moment then. But now it felt different. The sirens grew louder, and a couple of children scooted closer to each other, sensing the tension in the air. Miss Hartley gently instructed everyone to sit together on the reading rug, trying to keep the atmosphere calm. She didn't want panic spreading among them. While the children settled, she quietly stepped to the window, looking out toward the parking lot. 2 patrol cars pulled up, their lights flashing silently before the officers even got out. The principal hurried toward them, speaking quickly, glancing back at Miss Hartley's classroom with concern. Something in the principal's expression, a mix of worry and confusion, sent another wave of uneasiness through her. Miss Hartley turned back to the room just as Alina shifted her gaze from the door to the window. Her tiny fingers tightened around her backpack straps. Her breathing grew uneven, and she whispered something so soft Miss Hartley almost didn't hear it. "He's here." Miss Hartley froze. "Who, sweetheart?" she asked, stepping closer but keeping her voice gentle. But Alina didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window, wide and unblinking. Before Miss Hartley could say another word, a faint silhouette moved past the school fence. Just for a second, just enough for the little girl to recoil as if she had seen a ghost. And when the officers finally stepped into the classroom, ready to ask questions and take statements, Alina took a small step back, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Please don't let them find me." Officer Daniels crouched down slowly, keeping a respectful distance from Alina. He was an older man with kind eyes, someone who had dealt with frightened children before, but even he sensed that this situation was different. The fear in Alina's eyes wasn't confusion or a momentary panic. It was deep, familiar fear, the kind that grows over time. He spoke softly, using the calm tone he had practiced for years. "You're safe here, sweetheart. No one is going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. We just want to help." But Alina didn't blink. Her eyes stayed locked on the window as if that single spot held the answer to everything. Miss Hartley followed her gaze but saw nothing, just an empty stretch of pavement and the school fence swaying lightly in the breeze. Still, the chill that ran through her didn't fade. While Officer Daniels tried to speak gently to Alina, the second officer, a younger woman named Officer Mira, quietly pulled Miss Hartley aside. "Has she ever acted like this before?" she asked. Miss Hartley shook her head. "Never. She's usually very quiet, but she's never shown fear like this." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Something must have happened before she came in today. Something she didn't know how to tell us." Officer Mira nodded, her jaw tightening slightly. "We'll need to talk to the principal, maybe call in the school counselor. And we'll want to get in touch with her family." The moment the word family left her mouth, Alina suddenly tensed, as if she felt the shift in conversation even from across the room. She pressed her back against the wall and held her backpack tighter. It was clear she didn't want to leave the school with anyone, and that included whoever was supposed to look after her. As the officers stepped outside to speak privately with the principal, Miss Hartley stayed near the children, offering soft reassurance. But her mind kept replaying the morning, Alina's refusal to sit, her trembling hands, her whispered words. Each piece added weight to a growing mystery that made her stomach tighten. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Officer Mira was speaking in low tones. "We need to verify who's allowed to pick her up. If she reacted that strongly, we can't assume anything." The principal nodded, flipping through the student records with shaky hands. "Her guardian, it says she lives with her aunt. But no one has ever reported any issues." He paused, swallowing hard. Still, something doesn't feel right. Outside, a few parents gathering for a meeting noticed the police cars and began whispering among themselves. By the time the clock hit mid-morning, rumors were already spreading. Something about a frightened child, sirens, teachers crying. The kind of talk that moves fast in a small community. Back in the classroom, Miss Hartley carefully approached Alina again, keeping her movements slow. "Would you like to sit with me?" she asked quietly. But Alina shook her head, her voice trembling as she whispered. "He's looking for me." "Who is?" Miss Hartley asked gently, but Alina only shook her head again, as if saying the name might make everything worse. Before Miss Hartley could ask more, the door cracked open and the school counselor stepped inside, her expression warm but serious. She approached with the same gentle caution, ready to help. Yet before she could even introduce herself, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. A single knock. Too soft to be official, too slow to be casual. Everyone in the room turned toward the door. And Alina, she froze completely, her small hand rising to her mouth as she whispered one word that sent a shiver through every adult present. "He found me." The room fell into a thick, breathless silence. Even the children sensed the moment shift, their small bodies drawing closer together as if instinct alone warned them something was very wrong. Miss Hartley took a subtle step in front of Alina, just enough to show she wasn't going to let anyone reach the girl without going through her first. Her heart pounded so loudly she could feel it in her throat. The knock came again, gentle, patient, like someone who wasn't in a hurry. Someone who expected the door to open simply because they wanted it to. Officer Daniels, who had just re-entered the hallway after speaking with the principal, looked sharply toward the classroom. His hand hovered near his radio, though he made no sudden move. "Stay with the kids," he whispered to Miss Hartley before stepping slowly toward the door. Alina clutched her backpack even tighter. Her eyes glistened with fear, but there was something else too. A kind of exhausted sadness, like she had been running from something for a long time and was running out of places to hide. Officer Daniels reached the door and pressed his palm against it. "This is the police," he called out calmly. "Identify yourself." But there was no answer, only silence. He opened the door just an inch, enough to peek outside. The hallway was empty, clean and still. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face. But Alina shook her head fiercely. "He's close," she whispered. "He doesn't want you to see him." Miss Hartley felt a heaviness settle in her chest. The way Alina said it. It wasn't the voice of a child being dramatic. It was the voice of someone who had learned to be careful. Officer Daniels shut the door again and turned the lock, even though school policy discouraged locking classroom doors during the day. "We're just being cautious," he assured the room, though the tremor in his voice hinted otherwise. The counselor moved closer to Alina, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, can you tell us who you're talking about? Is it someone from home?" Alina lowered her eyes, her fingers twisting the strap of her backpack. She didn't answer. But then she whispered something so quietly the counselor had to lean in just to catch it. "He told me not to tell." The counselor and Miss Hartley exchanged a look, one filled with concern, frustration, and helplessness. Whatever was happening, this child had been carrying it alone. Outside, the distant murmur of concerned parents grew louder. The police had asked them to stay in the meeting hall, but people were already growing restless. Whispers filled the building like scattered winds. Rumors of a stranger near the school, a frightened child, the sudden arrival of officers. A few teachers pressed their faces to the windows, scanning the grounds. Then the principal rushed down the hallway, his keys jingling nervously. "Officers," he said, breathless. "Someone just called the front office asking if Alina was present today. They refused to give their name." The secretary said the caller's voice sounded off. Officer Myra's expression hardened. "Did they call from a registered number?" "No. It was blocked." The officers exchanged a look that said enough. They were dealing with something far more serious than a misunderstanding. Inside the classroom, the children sat huddled quietly as Miss Hartley tried to keep her voice steady. She read from a picture book, though her eyes kept flicking toward the door. Every small sound in the hallway made her tense. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the small window beside the door. Not a clear figure, just a blur of movement. Quick. Intentional. Alina gasped and buried her face in her backpack. Officer Daniels rushed to the window, but by the time he reached it, the shadow was gone. He turned to the room, his voice low but firm. "Everyone stay together. Do not open this door for anyone unless it is one of us." Miss Hartley's breath hitched when she noticed something on the floor near the door, something small and folded, as if slipped through the narrow gap beneath it. Note. Its edges were crumpled, the handwriting rushed. She bent down slowly, her hands trembling as she picked it up. The moment she unfolded it, her face drained of color. Her eyes lifted to the officers, then to the terrified little girl behind her. Because the note had one chilling line, just 7 words that pulled every thread of safety out of the room. "I know she's with you. Bring her out." Miss Hartley's fingers tightened around the note, the thin paper trembling slightly as she passed it to Officer Daniels. His eyes scanned the words, and a deep frown carved into his face. Officer Mira immediately stepped toward the door, checking the lock again even though she already knew it was secure. The room felt smaller now, the air heavy with the sense that whoever had slipped that note under the door wasn't far. They were close, watching, waiting, confident enough to approach a police-guarded classroom without hesitation. Alina, sensing the adult's alarm, slowly lowered her backpack from her face. She studied Officer Daniels with a fragile, pleading expression, as if searching him for some sign that things would be okay. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "He said he would come. He always comes." Miss Hartley knelt gently beside her. "You're not alone anymore," she murmured, even though her own voice wavered. Officer Daniels clicked on his radio. "All units, we need eyes on every doorway and corridor. Someone is inside the building. Repeat, inside the building." Static crackled back, followed by the principal's anxious voice announcing that additional officers were already on the way. But even knowing help was coming didn't make the room feel any safer. The children stayed quietly on the rug, some leaning against each other, others watching the adults with anxious curiosity. No one cried. They all understood that something serious was happening. The counselor bent near Miss Hartley, lowering her voice. "We might need to move the children to a safer location." But before anyone could respond, a sudden loud clang echoed from the far end of the hallway, metal hitting tile. Everyone jumped. Officer Mira stepped up in a defensive stance, listening hard. Then came another sound. Not footsteps, not voices. A fire alarm, shrill, blaring, echoing through every hallway. The lights flashed red, and a chaotic buzz swept through the building as classrooms up and down the hall opened their doors in confusion. Children began filing out with their teachers, unaware of the danger, believing it was just another drill. But Officer Daniels knew better. He muttered under his breath. "He's trying to flush her out." The alarm wasn't random. It wasn't a malfunction. Someone had pulled it on purpose. Miss Hartley felt her stomach twist. "We can't let her go into that crowd," she whispered. "If he blends in." Officer Mira cut her off. "Exactly. He'll use the chaos." The principal appeared at the doorway, shouting over the alarm. "Everyone needs to evacuate. Now." Officer Daniels stepped forward, blocking him. "We're keeping this room secure. Lock the building down. No one leaves yet." The principal froze, torn between school policy and the fear rising in his eyes. But before he could respond, the counselor glanced out the classroom window, and her face drained of color. "Someone's in the parking lot," she whispered. "Near the back gate." Officer Mira rushed to the window. A tall figure stood near the fence, half hidden by the flashing alarm lights. Not moving, just watching, waiting. His posture was calm, almost practiced, like he knew exactly what he was doing. But then, another figure appeared on the opposite side of the yard. A second person, dressed similarly, standing unervingly still. Miss Hartley's breath hitched. "There are two." Officer Daniels stiffened. The realization hit all at once. This wasn't one person chasing a child. This was coordinated. Alina's small voice trembled as she clutched Miss Hartley's hand. "I told you, he brought others." Officer Mira backed away from the window, her breathing quickening. We need backup now. This is bigger than we thought. As the alarm continued screeching, footsteps thundered through the hallway. Adults shouting, children crying, doors slamming. The entire school was in motion, and the two figures outside were closing in. And just when it felt like the tension couldn't push any tighter, the classroom intercom crackled to life with a voice no one expected. Calm, unfamiliar male voice. "I only want the girl," it said steadily. "Open the door." Miss Hartley's heart dropped. Alina buried her face again, whispering just one trembling sentence. "He's already inside." Officer Daniels moved instantly, stepping between the door and the children. His voice steady even though his pulse was racing. Officer Mira crossed to the intercom panel and yanked the cord free, cutting off the stranger's voice mid-breath. The sudden silence felt even louder than the alarm. Only the red lights continued flashing, casting long shadows across the classroom walls. Miss Hartley pulled Alina close, feeling the girl's tiny heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. The hallway outside had gone strangely quiet. No footsteps, no voices, only the steady scream of the fire alarm echoing through the vents. Officer Daniels signaled for Miss Hartley and the counselor to gather the children near the far side of the room. "Stay low, stay quiet," he whispered. "Help is almost here." But his eyes stayed fixed on the door, watching for the slightest movement. Alina tugged gently at Miss Hartley's sleeve. "He doesn't want the others," she whispered, voice trembling. "Just me." Miss Hartley shook her head firmly. "You're not going anywhere alone." Before Alina could reply, a sudden thud shook the classroom door, hard enough to rattle the glass. The children jumped, some covering their ears, others clinging to Miss Hartley. Officer Mira reached for her radio, calling for immediate entry from the outside units. Her voice steady despite the fear tightening her throat. Another thud. Then another. But suddenly, as if someone flipped a switch, the fire alarm stopped. Every flash of red froze. The entire school plunged into a strange, humming silence. Then came the sound of heavy boots running down the hallway. More than one pair. Dozens. Officer Daniels rushed to the window, peeking out just as a convoy of police vehicles rolled into the parking lot. Officers poured out, securing the perimeter and surrounding the two figures near the fence. Over the radio, voices crackled with updates. Units inside, units outside, intruders detained. Relief washed through the classroom like a wave, but Officer Mira frowned. If the two outside are in custody, then who activated the intercom? A soft creak answered her. The classroom closet door, one no one had checked, shifted open by an inch. Officer Daniels raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay back. Slowly, he approached the small wooden door, each step measured. He reached out, lifted the handle and pulled it open. Inside, crouched in the shadows, was not a man, not an intruder, but a teenage boy, disheveled, shaking, his eyes red from crying. He held his hands up immediately. "Please," he said, voice cracking. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." Miss Hartley blinked in shock. "Who are you?" The boy swallowed, tears spilling. "My name is Evan. I'm Alina's older brother." The room fell into stunned silence. Alina stepped forward, eyes wide, her fear momentarily replaced by confusion. "Evan." He nodded quickly. "I was trying to get her away from them. Not take her. Protect her." Officer Mira exchanged a sharp glance with Daniels. "From who?" Evan wiped his face with his sleeve. "Not the men outside. They're hired to scare people. Keep us quiet. They're working for someone else." Miss Hartley felt her stomach twist. "Someone else?" Evan nodded again, voice trembling. "Our aunt. She's been letting people come to the house. People we don't know. They threatened us if we told anyone. I ran this morning before they woke up. I came to get Alina out before they did." As the weight of his words settled, Officer Daniels received a sudden radio call. Urgent, tense. He put it on speaker. "Be advised," the voice said rapidly. "The woman listed as Alina's guardian has just arrived at the school. She's demanding to come inside. Says she wants her niece. Miss Hartley felt her breath leave her body. Evan shook his head violently. No, that's not our aunt. That's someone else she sent. The radio crackled again. She refuses to wait. She says she knows you have the girl. Everyone froze, eyes wide. Alina took a shaky breath. She's the one, she whispered, voice barely audible. She's the one he works for. Officer Daniels tightened his grip on the door handle. The hallway outside filled with approaching footsteps. Low, purposeful. And the final twist settled in like a cold shadow. They had prepared for the wrong enemy. The footsteps outside grew closer, but this time they didn't carry the same cold intention as before. Officer Daniels braced himself, ready for anything, but when the door finally opened, it wasn't the false guardian standing there. Instead, it was Chief Ramirez, flanked by 2 officers and a school security guard. Their faces were serious but steady, and the relief that washed through the room was almost overwhelming. "We've got her," the chief announced, his voice firm. "The woman posing as Alina's aunt has been detained at the front entrance. She didn't get anywhere near the children." He stepped into the room, scanning the frightened faces before his eyes softened. "You're all safe now." Miss Hartley finally let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She gathered Alina and Evan close, her hands gently resting on their shoulders. "It's over," she whispered. "You're both safe." Evan nodded slowly, though the fear still clung to him. "They won't find us now." Officer Mira crouched beside him. "No," she said with certainty. "We're arranging protective custody. You'll be with people who will keep you safe. No more running." Alina leaned into her brother, small fingers gripping his sleeve as if afraid he might disappear again. For the first time, her eyes didn't hold fear, they held hope. "We can stay together?" she asked softly. Evan smiled through a trembling breath. "Yeah, together." Chief Ramirez spoke gently, but with the weight of someone who had seen too many cases like this. "Both of you will be placed with emergency foster care until the investigation is complete. But you won't be separated. You've been through enough." The principal stepped into the classroom then, his face pale but relieved. "The school is on lockdown until parents arrive," he explained. "But the threat is contained." He glanced at Miss Hartley. "Thank you. Your quick thinking protected these children." Miss Hartley shook her head. "It wasn't just me. The officers, the staff." But the truth was, she had never faced anything like this. And still, she had stood her ground for her students. As the children were escorted out one small group at a time, the tension slowly drained from the building. Some clung to their teachers, others cried with relief when they saw parents waiting outside. The chaotic worry of earlier had softened into a quiet hum of gratitude and exhaustion. Once the hallway had cleared, Officer Daniels knelt in front of Alina. "You were really brave today," he told her. "You told us what you could. You helped us protect everyone." She lowered her eyes, almost shy. "I was scared." "That's what being brave is," he replied gently. "Doing the right thing even when you're scared." Evan placed an arm around her shoulders, holding her close as officers guided them toward a waiting patrol car. Reporters had begun gathering outside the school gate, sensing a breaking story, but officers formed a protective circle around the children, shielding them from flashing cameras and shouted questions. As they were driven away, Alina looked back at the school one last time. The building looked peaceful now, nothing like the place it had felt like earlier. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe the danger had truly passed. Miss Hartley watched the car pull away, her hand pressed against her chest. Today had changed her. It had reminded her why she became a teacher, not just to educate but to protect, to listen, to see beyond what a child says and into what their silence hides. The world outside could be unpredictable, sometimes frightening. But moments like this, where people came together, where strangers protected one another, where truth finally stepped out of hiding, showed that hope could still rise from uncertainty. And for Alina and Evan, this day marked the end of fear, And the beginning of something better, something safer. A new chapter. New chance. New life.